You know what? It seems to me in our profession that sometimes even the best situations go south and we find ourselves looking for a job. Whether we initiated that or otherwise, we find ourselves looking for a job. Some of us, it might be the first time. Some of us, it might be the first time in 10 years. But I bet that you have been asked this question before. Um, what kind of things should we think about if we're preparing to go looking for a job?
Alright. Oh, yes, definitely. Um, I'm gonna start with the idea that job hunting, job searches, whatever you wanna call it, it's not a difficult process as far as logistics. It's a job of persistence. You know what I mean? You
I
just you
do.
just
Yeah.
you know, 'cause I do letters of recommendation for people, and, and they'll call and say, "Hey, will you kind of do this, whatever?" And I don't mind doing letters of recommendation. The problem, and I hate to start with this point, but make sure that when you have the people that are recommending you for a job, make sure to it's okay to list a Mike Lunney that you've had come and work your band or you've known for X number of years. Make sure there's people that are colleagues that work within your system because it's really hard on these new recommendation forms because it'll have questions like, is are they punctual?
Right. Do they show up
Um,
every day?
yeah, do they take care of paperwork? And see, those are things I really don't know about. So I have to
Right.
put NA for those, and then I'll give a letter of recommendation at the bottom, and I think that carries a little bit of weight depending on networking, um, and I don't mind doing that at all, but just make sure that it's not just a bunch of people you know. Make sure it's, because if you don't put down your immediate supervisor, whether that's a principal or a fine arts director or a band director, they're gonna call them anyway.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that because
Okay.
you sparked something. But let me ask you this: to get to that point, it's it's interesting that somebody would ask those questions on a letter of a recommendation because they're assuming that you will want to be recommended by people at the job you're at.
Yes, but that's not part of my letter, that's just all the questions
No, that's what I'm
the
saying.
school
That's
asks, yeah.
interesting that they choose those types of questions,
Oh, yeah.
especially from the standpoint of I think there's different time periods for job hunting in our profession. Would you agree with
Mhm.
that? That
Oh,
that
yeah.
that like maybe now or even our annual MEA is typically in the state of Texas in February. There's already people looking for a job then.
Yes.
So that would be like the first wave. Would you
Oh, yeah, there's definitely 4 waves. The first one is pre-UIL. It's kinda like from February up through our contest or maybe even January 1 through our contest. Those are kinda the jobs that are open for people that have announced retirements or they're building new schools. There's a
Okay,
new
yeah,
school in
so
the
you
district or there's staff expansion. Those will show up in wave 1, and that wave's kind of been a bit lighter this year. Some of these positions are even open for immediate hiring for whatever that's worth.
right,
Saying, "We wanna hire you on right now, and then we'll pay you the rest of the contract and go on." Sometimes that even happens, but that's wave 1, which brings
okay.
up a good point, and I understand this completely. If you're in wave 1 trying to look for a job, don't panic as the one who's sending out applications, because there's a lot of time. There's 3 more waves coming, and a lot of times it's more like I need to. I don't bill them for any of this, so this is a joke. I need to bill them for therapy because 'cause they're
Yeah.
like, I'm never gonna get a job.
I
It's never gonna happen." It's like March 4th. It's never gonna happen, and
Nobody loves me.
I'm just gonna
Nobody
give
wants
up.
me.
I can't find a job. No one will answer my calls, and I'm like, "Okay, lay down on the couch. Tell me all your
Here's
problems.
the
Is this a daddy issue? What what's going on here? What's going on here? Why are you so
uh,
scared to death?" And I joke about it, but it's easy to joke when I'm retired and I have passive income and
sure.
whatever. But I remember that feeling in your gut that, man, I've got a family and I've got to provide for said family. So if you're in wave one, which we're now in wave two, but if it's a wave one moment, don't panic yet. I always tell them, said, I will tell you when to panic. So
I'll let you know.
just call me and I'll let you know it is time to panic. Okay. But prior to that, it is not time to panic. Then wave two is after UIL and
Okay.
before the end of the school year. It's that for some go to contests early as like February 27th. Some have contests in April. But whatever that context is for your part of the state or your region, it's people accepting new positions from wave one. You know what I mean? And people choosing to move on, sometimes due to UIL scores,
Right.
whether that's good or bad, but it's a really good UIL scores. Sometimes they'll stepping stone out of a one program into another. And this one kind of we're in the midst of that one right now.
Right.
Actually, we're in wave two for that, and it's still not time to panic. It's still the musical chairs are just now getting set up and the song's starting. You
Right.
know what I mean? As people are looking to get into their chair. But then wave 3 is at the end. This is the toughest one. Wave 3 is at the end of school until the 45-day mark. Usually early July, like July 3rd. It depends. It's 45 days before the first day of actual instruction on that school's instructional calendar.
Right. So I was going to
And that's
explain
getting
that for
weird.
people that don't have contracts set up like we do. So,
Yeah, and now it's getting harder because I know schools that are starting first day of school, August 5th.
wow. Yeah.
Well, that pushes it back into June now, doesn't it? So wave 3 just got compressed by these schools, especially schools that do a 4-day week. And that's
Right.
that's a big I don't know how many schools around the nation are doing that. That seems to be a big movement right now. Not sure how some band programs has thrived in it. Others, it's been a destructive thing, and I'm not sure if it's more the 4-day week or maybe how we approach the 4-day week. I think there's a lot of different wheels in that machine that determine whether we're gonna be successful more so than just the band director.
That's another
Um,
podcast.
that's another one, yeah, that's a big one, okay? But this is when most jobs open up in wave 3. Wave 3 is when it just explodes on the TMEA, on job boards, and so forth, and there's a lot to choose from. I would also say, especially during wave 3, network out there, college directors, people you student taught under, friends you went to college with that now work in a different part of the state. Um, it seems to me, and I don't know if I think it's still this way. It's more about who you know to get a foot in the door. Then you have to prove yourself. You have to have a
Sure.
good interview and a good resume. But there's a lot of folks that don't ever get the light of day just because they know people, but they don't want to bother people. It's not a bother. We've all been there. We've all been on their side of,
Sure.
I need someone to help me open this door in this school district so I could have a possibility of working there.
But I'm going to piggyback that with this, Mike. It's also be careful how you treat people because you never know when you're going to need them. So if you are just an outright ass to
Mhm.
everybody that you know in your district or surrounding, and nobody wants to recommend you if you treat them that way. So I always try to make sure it's harder the older I get, and the less times I feel like I'll probably go through the process. But it doesn't cost anything to be nice, and it
Yeah.
sure will help if you ever need help.
Yes, and you can learn to get along pretty much
Right.
with anybody, and then you can go back in your truck and scream at the end of the day.
Right. I'm not saying be people's best friends, but it doesn't cost anything to be nice.
Yes, you're exactly right, and I've been the receiving end of burning a bridge or 2 in my past on, job-wise,
Right.
and it did come back to haunt me because all of a sudden that person that I burned that bridge with now is the fine arts director at said school, and it's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
never mind."
You never know where you're gonna run into people again.
Yeah, yeah, just because you didn't like them 'em doesn't mean they're gonna move up the ladder somewhere,
Right.
or have and, a lot of the calls I hardly ever this is gonna be bizarre. I think the people out there listening, they're looking for jobs will think this is really odd, but it's the truth in my existence. I very rarely get a call from administration for a person that submitted an application and listed me as a reference. That almost never happens.
Okay.
Never. Never. I don't know why, but it just never happens. You know who I get the call from? I get the call from an administrator who knew of my administrators who knows I'm a band director and
Right.
knows that I know that person. And they
Exactly.
call and say, "Hey, Mike, you weren't listed as a reference for this person that we've got applying. What can you
But
tell me about them?" That happens at least once a week.
oh, wow.
So be aware of that if you're applying for jobs that, even if you don't put someone down as a reference, other people will get calls. Just as simple as I've lived almost my whole professional life in, Wichita Falls and Abilene, kind of that North Central Texas moment. So people see that as at least I've got my ear to the ground,
Right.
that, "Did you know so and so at this school?" So be aware of that, that other people will be called,
And I'm gonna
you
tell you,
know?
the world is smaller with the internet than it used to be.
Oh god, yes. Yeah.
Everybody's connected so much more tightly and closely than, 50 years ago. So,
Yes, no doubt. And that final wave is the one that's most of the, nervousness and anxiety and, shall I say, butt pucker, okay, is wave number 4. Most people are locked into their contract, but there are still openings.
the sphincter season.
Sphincter season, the sphincter wave, okay? It's like mid-July until the start of the school year, and I know people who have been hired the day before summer band.
Yeah.
And it's just a situation of, and usually it's not that they've been forgotten, most of the time it's someone who is maybe gonna work on their master's,
Right.
so they really weren't looking for a job per se, then all of a sudden, they end of July, they realize that, "Oh, this isn't gonna work financially, I'm gonna have to get a job," as they
Right.
throw their name out there, and then someone else in another school goes to sell insurance or to work somewhere else, and all of a sudden there's an opening, and they just plug in a person and interview them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's the hardest wave, but still, if you're gonna panic, that would be the time to sort of, I hate to even say panic, but to make plan B, plan C. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna go work for maybe help out at a music store? Am I gonna work at Academy and sell guns? What am I gonna do for a year? I've got to figure out something to do to put food on my table or go back to school. I This is gonna sound so anti-educational. I very seldom advise someone just to go back to get their master's just because they didn't get a job, because all you're
Right.
doing is accruing more
Debt.
debt. Yeah, and it's, you're not really making yourself more hireable as a first year teacher to have a master's degree, but that's to each their own. Mike Lunney did it his way, I did it my way, but
And now
I've
the
got my
jobs are
bachelor's
scarce.
degree. I did 1 semester of master's work, and, I don't wanna do that anymore, so I just wanna work, and it's worked for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody, because there are jobs out there that require a master's.
Right.
Now, some that require a doctorate in high
Right.
school education. Think about that. That's kinda
That
crazy, isn't it?
that is
Y
kinda crazy.
As they move up their mid-level management certification and they wanna be a fine arts director, that doctorate's pretty handy,
Yeah.
you know? I just think that, whole 'nother podcast, but do a balance of debt to positive energy ratio. If I'm $180,000 in debt for student loans, will I ever make that up?
Yeah, let's work some of that off.
Yeah, yeah, and it might be they just wanna be at that level, because I know lots of guys with their doctorate in music, and they just like to be at a university and kinda butt heads with those other doctors of music, and that's important to them, and I respect that.
But I also
Yeah.
think that there's large argument for know where your happy is.
Yeah.
Just because you see other people, your contemporaries, your friends, who go back and get masters and doctorates and move into the administration side and move up, that might not make Derek happy.
Right.
I might be happy teaching kids for the rest of my life how to find beat one,
Right.
and that's okay.
That's
That's great.
okay. Yeah, that's perfectly fine, okay? Some things to think about as we're panicking, okay? If you're still in wave 2, you actually have plenty of time. If you're worried, find a few trusted individuals to look over your resume, and, uh and I've done this for people. I do a mock interview or 2.
Right. I
You
know
know,
you
I'll
do
do
that.
a I'll do a Zoom meeting, and then we'll just do it as if I were hiring them, just to get a feel for how they're answering questions, and just, not that it's right or wrong coming from Mike Loney, but just a perspective. But do it with about 2 or 3 different people, and you'll find a balance of what will work for you. It might be how you're presenting yourself on paper is presenting you from getting calls and interviews. The resume paper and the cover letter is really important, okay?
Right.
And, then finally, most of wave 1 and 2 is headband director positions. They really are. Most of them in wave 1 and 2, unless it's a new position being created, like we're gonna have a percussion, specialist on our campus. But you'll see people move into these positions and a lot more assistant positions opening up from mid-May on. So the assistant positions are you if you're looking to be an assistant at a middle school, and that's a really smart thing to do, by the way, just be an assistant with somebody and learn.
So
I
let me
did it.
ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you a question because this is part of our world that I really haven't dealt with that much. I'm very seasonally involved in. Do you know someone? Could you help us find someone? Or from the other side of it, hey, I'm looking maybe to kind of make a move this direction, that direction. But as a father and as a grandfather, I have, and as a person who's worked with young people before, find myself sometimes saying, "You keep telling me there's no job. What you're telling me is there's not a job that you think you want to do." And I don't know if you feel that way about our friends in music education. Sometimes, uh, if it looks like the market's kind of tight, or are you holding out for unrealistic job offers when there's plenty of them staring you in the face?
Yeah, a lot of times when, like when my first job was at Throckmorton, and that wasn't my aspiration when I decided to major in music. It ended up being a really great job. It really did. But you don't go and practice and do all your stuff to go, I sure hope I end up someday in the middle of a county where there's one high school with 95 kids and I've got 17 in the band.
And
And
I'm the only music teacher in the
yeah.
county.
Yeah, I'm the only music teacher in the county, but it was the best formative experience of my life, and so sometimes don't s and I also applied to the director at Burke Burnett, Texas, a Class 4A band when 5A was the biggest.
Okay.
Mike Lunney applied at that.
Well, good for Mike Lenny.
Yeah, and the Lord knew that if I were to have gotten that job, I'd have probably been fired within about the first 6 weeks
Uh,
because the expectations were beyond my ability level, but I was too young and stupid to know that. I just thought, "Hey, I can do that band."
right.
And I think sometimes doors are closed on purpose,
Yeah. How
and
hard could
so
it
it
be?
worked. And it's not as much what the job is, I find it more so the geographical location.
Okay.
They wanna get into what I call that I-35 power corridor of bands and going down 45 down to Houston and even down into the valley a little bit. The people from up here will not want to go down to the valley because it seems so foreign to them, even though there's some of the most amazing bands in the state are down in the Rio Grande Valley area, the McAllens and the Romas and all those schools. But sometimes we're comfortable somewhere. I know
Right.
guys that teach in the hill country just because they wanna live in the hill country. I know
Right.
guys that teach in West Texas, and I don't know why they do. No, I'm kidding. I guess it's for the dirt storms, I don't know.
Well, I was going to tell you though
I mean, I've spent my whole life sort of West Texas, not
that
really, but
that really is one of the battles in some of the
yeah,
smaller communities in West Texas is that everybody wants to be in the metroplex, or everybody wants to be around, what they perceive as hot and happening, and you know, mul
yeah,
really large staffs. And so I appreciate so much the people we have in West Texas who are willing to get in there with 1 or 2 people and teach kids and do the things. But I get where you're going with that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's hard to explain to them that maybe it's a better position. There's positions that open up in the western part of our state that a young single person could go there with how they set up their salary structure and their medical payments and matching 401ks. That I guarantee if I was 22 years old, I could go there for 5 years and I could come away with about $300,000 in the bank
Right.
at age
That
26, and
right.
then I could put that into some sort of mutual funds and never touch it again, and it'd be about $3.2 million by the time I was 65, and then I could go to the Metroplex, do whatever I wanted to do, get my teacher pay and get my retirement when the time comes, and knowing that there's millions of dollars sitting in a Merrill Lynch account
Right.
just waiting for me to take it out, not even investing anything further, you
But
know? There's opportunity financial and some great programs on to boot.
even beyond that, if I'm a middle you correct me, please, because I'm talking out of turn. If I'm a middle school director and I wanna be a head director, I don't have head director experience, but if I go to one of those schools that we're talking about and I am the head director and I fight through it and I create success, and as you say, along the way, I'm already building I've already got my head director experience. I might have a leg up.
Oh, you're exactly right. Yeah,
So,
just 1 year of positive head director experience can maybe open a little bit of a door into that I-35 power corridor, and you might have to go in as an assistant and then work your way up, but at least they will look at you
right,
because you're no longer just a first-year teacher who hasn't proven anything yet. You're not a
exactly.
proven concept yet,
And all
okay?
this from the concept of from the listen, don't turn your nose down at a situation till you actually look at it and consider.
Yes, yes.
So, all right.
You're exactly right. Something to think about in today's world because this didn't exist. Thank God there was no social media when I was in
I
college.
say that all the
There
time.
there's no record of Mike Lunney's absolute stupidity. There's a few pictures that come out every once in a while of me, like, flipping off my friends or something or yeah, but thank God there was no video of anything. But a quick reminder about your social media presence for and I have this discussion, especially younger directors, you are free to place anything you want on social media, anything you desire, whether it be political, whether it be party time, whatever. Just understand that the people who are hiring, they're gonna search your pages, and they're gonna review whatever public information is out there.
Right.
And so they will figure out a way to see it. They will
You are
figure out a way to
not
see it.
breaking any laws, but you are also not promoting your brand.
Right. And if you really want to post other things, I would suggest have a different name and have a different web page for that. I know lots of directors who have
My
a
burner
different.
account.
Yeah, they have their burner account on social media because they can post what they want to. But why make that a reason why a school's not gonna interview you?
Right.
What's the point in that? You
Because you'll
know,
never know. They just won't call.
they just won't call you. You're exactly right. Um, and if you're already hired somewhere, you still have the right to free speech in terms of what you post. Just as you've always had. You're free to post anything you wish. Just understand as soon as that content interrupts the educational environment and students in any classroom, you may also have the freedom from employment.
You're saying,
Okay. In addition to your freedom of speech. So be smart. And I'm not saying we have to toe the line and George Orwell,
yeah, we're
1984,
not
Big
robots.
Brother is
Yeah.
watching. Yeah, I'm not saying that, but maybe be a little more intelligent about what you throw out there for general consumption.
Well,
I
what I
think my
love, Mike, is how you, in the notes, people can't see this, so I'm going to say it. You have an entire paragraph that is 2 words: be smart.
yeah. It's a good idea. It's good. I haven't always adhered to that, methodology, but it's a good thing to do. Just be smart about what you're doing, you
And if
know,
you're
uh
not sure what smart is, ask someone you think would
Yeah.
know.
And I use my I mean, I'm so antiquated, old people use Facebook for the most part, so I'm a Facebook user, but my
I feel
Facebook is
attacked.
it's filled up with my grandsons and stupid band memes and where I've gone to work. You'd be hard pressed to find one political, uh posting, and I have my beliefs, but I'm kinda like how Dolly Parton says it. It's not anybody else's business,
Right.
so that I'm in the business to provide a service to people, and why would I alienate one half of my people? You know?
Speaking of
J
memes,
Yeah.
I read one years ago and I revisit it often. Your uh, endless, persistent political ramblings finally convinced me to change my mind, said no
Yes.
one ever.
Yeah. I like the one that's, "Time is short, so make sure to waste your time arguing with strangers on the internet." And there's times when I see something posted and I start to comment back. And then
Yeah.
I write it
I
out, then I
erase it.
go, "Delete, delete, delete, delete." It is not worth it. And even if I feel like I'm right, I'm not gonna change anybody's mind. So now we're on to a whole whole 'nother podcast,
Right.
you know,
But my last thought I'll put on there is
yeah.
young people, I hope you realize this faster than I do. As smart as I think I am, nobody cares.
Yeah, that's right. You have to be a proven concept either through college or through high school, and that's the only way you're gonna get interviews, and
Right.
there's some, considerations for obtaining a job interview. There's no perfect recipe for landing a job, but here's a couple of things you might consider trying to get your foot in the door. One is make sure to proofread and have others proofread your materials
You
for
can't
your
use
resume and your
numbers
cover
and
letter.
abbreviated words, and
Oh, yeah, and, I've had cover letters, addressed to the wrong school.
that's perfect.
So I was hiring people,
That's the
said,
best.
I'm pursuing a job at Big Spring, Texas, and I would really love to work with your program, and I'm here in Wiley." Yeah, I'm in a
Right,
different school district, and so they didn't even take and I've made mistakes, but sometimes an extra set of eyes just to look at it,
right.
and, it's scary. The things like that should not happen, and if they do happen, do you think that person reading the resume or cover letter is gonna tell you about that?
Nope.
No.
They
They're
got a
just gonna
round
throw
file they're gonna put it in.
they're gonna wad it up and drop it in the trash can,
Yep.
is what they're gonna do. So if this person doesn't have the, time and ability to proofread their own resume and cover letter, why do I want them working here? And that's kind of a dramatic statement, but that is the first impression, isn't it?
Dare say, we probably don't verbalize it all the time, but that's what we say.
Yeah. So it's risky to use the same cover letter for each job. Take time to write out a cover letter that pertains to that job, whether it's to their socioeconomic status, their success in the Lone Star Cup, their whatever it is, their past
There's
experience in band of success and or failure. Address it to that band and to that school.
make it unique, right?
Yeah, make it unique because you're going to get burned on it. You're going to get burned. Um, Another one, research each program you apply to. The potential employer, if I'm trying to hire someone, because I was very lucky at Wiley, they allowed me to interview the people, and then I'd bring my final 3 to the principals, and then after the people left, the principals would look at me and go, "Who do you want?"
Right.
It was more they just wanted to make sure it wasn't something extreme, and I've never once had a principal go, "I just don't think we need to look at that person." It's always, "Okay, we've gone through the process, who do you want?" The
Yeah, but
potential employer.
I need to say this though, young people, that happens because Mike cultivated the trust and earned the respect of those administrators around him by doing the things he's telling you right now.
Well, I
It,
appreciate that. It
life
was
is
also they would
cumulative.
tell me, said, "You make your bed, you lie in it."
Don't
Said you
ruin my good.
they'd go, "If you hire an idiot, it's gonna be your problem because 'cause you're gonna have to work twice
Say,
as hard."
shoulder shrug.
Yeah, and I did cultivate a good culture, but they knew well that if I hired someone, it wasn't gonna be their problem. They had plausible deniability at that point.
Right. But they trusted you enough
They did trust me.
and you knew what you needed.
Yeah, and I knew what I needed, so it worked
Yeah.
out, okay? And we can tell very quickly if you know nothing about our school. I've actually had there's I worked at Abilene Wiley, and then
There
there's
is
the
a
we
Wiley
call it
ISD, right?
well, we call it the real Wiley.
Oh,
There's
did
the
you?
real in Abilene Wiley, we call it the real Wiley. There's the real
Yeah.
Wiley and there's Abilene Wiley. And the real Wiley, we'd have an applicant come in and start talking about the Wiley, that band, and the Pirates and the whatever. That's that Wiley band in Wiley, Texas. And it's like, oh, great. So they
Right.
they think they think they're at a whole different school right now, so make sure that it doesn't mean you have to spend hours and hours. Just Google it.
Be
Success in
smart.
whatever, test scores, whatever, if they've done really well in test scores, bring that up.
I can
"Oh, I
already
was
tell you
oh,
the
yeah.
title of this podcast is going to be Smart.
Yeah, be smart, yeah. Yeah, be smart as we can be, God only
Right.
gave me so much brain power. He gave me a really thick skull, but just, so much
But
brain
most of
power.
this is not a reasoning question. This is not a word question. All you got to do is get on the internet
Yes.
and look a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It's all out there. It's not like the old days when we had to call the road man from a certain music store to give us the insight
Yeah, we've
on
been
it. It's
kicked
it's
to the
all out
curb.
there,
I
man.
got it.
Yeah. Um, and it's not really a good idea to be really pushy asking for or inviting yourself to an interview.
Hmm.
I've had where they think they get a leg up if they, like, email me every 2 days. "Hey, where are you at in the process? What are you gonna do? When you"
Right.
and a little bit of that goes a long ways, and it's good
Right.
that
It's great
they
to
show
show interest
interest.
and follow up.
Show interest, okay? But don't email or phone call. The worst is phone calls. Do
Right.
not leave messages for the whoever's hiring. "Hey, I would really love an interview. What can I
Hey,
do? I really need an interview." You
it's
know
me again. Is this a good number?
yeah, and it almost appears almost desperate, you
Yeah.
know?
Agreed.
So and if you don't get an interview, you either don't fit the needs of that program. It's not personal, or there's something this is personal. There's something wonky in your written communication. But don't take it personal, keep trying, show it to people. I've had, people applying for jobs actually send me their emails to proof them before they send it to the school.
Right.
You know, and I'll say like, "Hey, that looks perfect," or I'll say, that's just a little off center the way you address this one thing." Said, I would word it this way." So sometimes it's being able to speak their language. You know,
I
the
get it.
language of the people applying is different than the language of the people accepting the
And I
applications.
hope you don't get blasted with emails after this, but you've been there. You know what that person's probably looking at
Yeah.
in those emails and those resumes and those introductions. It's probably smart to find somebody that's been there, done that.
Yeah, there's been some of the positions I've hired people for in my previous position as head band director that I'd have 75 applicants for one assistant band director position.
Right.
And so I would call out 30 of those just by grammar errors, misspellings, bad cover letters, and just throw them away.
Incorrect
Now,
information.
yeah, and then we kind of go from there. Now, one thing I did do that I know from the people applying, they get upset because people aren't keeping them up to speed on what's happening in the system. And I was real good or bad about that in terms of I would get all my 75 applicants, I'd call out the ones that I knew wouldn't make it, and then I would go ahead and send those 30 an email.
Pop
And it'd
off
be
that email right then.
yeah,
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, I've received X number of applicants, and, I appreciate you applying," and and it might have been something just real simple, and I might even say something about it. It might have just been a grammatical error, might have been a bad-looking resume, the way you presented it, and I just kind of a block letter kinda thing, and say, "Do I have permission to give your name to other people if they're looking for someone?" Because it might be something as simple as, "I'm looking for a clarinet player to help out in my beginning woodwind classes, and they're a very incredible percussionist."
Right.
And it's like, it's not that you're a bad applicant. Is it okay if I pass your name on if I have a friend who's looking for a percussionist? And so I'd keep them in the loop. And then as we got down to like the final 10, I would send out a letter to the who was the final 5 and who was the 6 through 10.
Right.
Those were 2 separate emails. So I hope that's not too complicated, but I tried to keep them in the loop so that they kinda knew where they were at. And I think most people and don't realize that once you offer a job to someone, then they have to accept the job, and it has to be signed off by the school board and the principals.
Right.
So they're upset that I haven't heard back in like 3 weeks, but it's not because we're ignoring people, it's because we haven't solidified the process. It might be 2.5 weeks later, and that person go, "No, I'm just gonna go ahead and work over somewhere else."
And I know this from a billing standpoint. I assume it's the same thing on hires. It has to go through the school board and get approval. They meet once a month.
Right.
So,
Yes, it has to have board approval. I always try to tell my, people I help because 'cause they'll say, "Should I go ahead and resign from the previous job?" "No."
right.
I don't so, well, they need to start looking for somebody. I know, but don't do it because what happens if this goes to the school board? The school board goes, "Hey, we've got some budget cuts. We're just not gonna have an assistant band director."
Right.
Now you don't have a job. Said, "Hang on to that." You can give the school permission because I don't know if you look at the job search, the job board, but it'll say, "Anticipating potential opening."
Right.
You can tell your people, said, "Hey, I've applied at these jobs. This is what I'm looking at. I've accepted the job. We're just going through the logistics of it, but I don't have a signed contract yet. But you have my permission to throw this up on the job board
Right.
as a potential opening." And everyone knows what that means, so they can still start searching. So that's kind of another rabbit to chase, but it's an important one
Well,
because
that one,
people, yeah,
I do want to come back to that in a future podcast because that seems like a scary thing. But to
yeah,
say, I might be leaving and them not go, no, 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 you are.
yeah, but they can't.
Right. I got
I
it.
say they can't, but you've got a contract with that school. They could if they had proper documentation, blah, blah, blah.
I
But
get
in
it.
most cases, everyone just kind of it's a an old term, it's a gentleman's agreement.
I think the
Yeah.
truth is probably leaning more towards they appreciate your honesty.
Yes.
So,
And they know you've applied because someone's already called them.
and it would also lend
You're not
itself to
hiding anything.
a conversation of what is it that we don't have that would make this job more appealing for you or the
Yes.
next person.
Yes.
Okay,
That's
rabbit
exactly
trail.
right.
Got to get back on. Sorry.
No, 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 you're good. And then, just your network, just make sure you have people that can speak to your character, integrity, work ethic, and teaching. Just have those people in your file, that whether it's a college band director, someone who's worked with your band, or for me now, I'm getting so dang old that it's people that were in my band. They're now band directors. I got to judge, uh, a kid who was, a kid, listen to me. He was 2002, he was my drum major at state marching, and he works
Okay.
at a 4A band over by Waco. So I got to actually judge his band for the first time. So that
Right.
was really kinda cool. So make sure you have people in your network that can vouch for you,
And I
and make sure you're honest with them.
right.
"Will you vouch for me?"
That's what I'm going to say. I think that needs to be addressed because
Yeah,
there are people that ask me for references all the time that I'm like, mm, and I try to do it diplomatically. I'm like, well, you can put me down,
yeah,
and some of them catch on and go, would you not give me a good reference? Let's just talk about the experience we've had together. And
mhm,
I think there's probably better choices for you for a reference. But if you want to put me down, I'm not going to tell you not to.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can say it also too, just, "Well, I'll do everything I can to emphasize the good things I see in your teaching."
Right.
And generally, an intelligent person will interpret that as, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't put him down as a reference." So it's a sticky, difficult situation, isn't it?
But I
'Cause
also think that the people that we want to give references to, we have different body languages, we have different inflections. You bet, man. That'd be awesome. Anything you need, I'm there.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
way different than you can.
Or the ones I love is when they say, "Can you type me up a letter of recommendation, and can you just send it to me, and I'll send it with all my packets?"
Right.
No.
Right.
I will not do that. So, and that's not good or bad. I mean, if it's
Right.
a really good person, I'm not gonna give them a copy of a letter of recommendation and let them be able to use that wherever they want to, because if I'm on the other end of the hiring process and I get a letter of recommendation that comes in the packet before I've actually talked to the person who's listed as a reference,
Right.
that's not really a good thing.
I agree.
Because I don't think the letter's honest at that point, because you've handed them that letter.
Right.
It's just things to work
Sure.
through. So just make sure your network has what's going on, okay? The next one for our new graduates, those first year teachers coming out in May, I always tell them, said, "Quit crying. You can cry after you get the diploma."
Right.
Once you get your diploma, then you can start crying. Okay. If you have more experience, more than just student teaching on your resume, put that on your resume. If you've taught lessons, you've taught band camps, you've taught scouting camps, you've done volunteer time, anything where you're working with different people. If you were the night manager at the Sonic, I think for a first year teacher, that's a legitimate thing to put on a resume,
Right.
that I've worked with people and I've done such and such. Now, if you're like a 10-year teacher, let's get that stuff off our resume.
Right.
It needs to be proof of concept now that I know what I'm doing and everything on here is banned. In fact, by the year 10, you should not list anything that you've done in college. You should just put, I've received my degree from Baylor University or wherever, and I graduated with this grade point average, and I was in these ensembles. You don't need to list I was section leader of the Golden Wave Band, and yeah.
No, I agree with
Uh,
that.
yeah, kinda get that stuff off of there,
I
okay?
hope that people grow and mature the rest of their life. So let's be
Yeah,
current with what we're listing. Yeah.
yeah, and if you get really old like me, if I was applying for jobs, oh my gosh, some of the stuff in college that things I would write on a resume, man, half those people are dead now that
Yeah.
are
I
they
got it.
passed away. It's like that's just old news, it's old
Right.
news. Um, Nothing, make sure you're getting into this profession because you actually like kids.
What?
If
I,
you're teaching music just because you love music, you will struggle. You gotta love kids, you gotta love music, and let that come across in your initial communication. Don't be afraid to say that if it's the truth, that you love working with kids, 'cause, we've all met that individual or 2 that's maybe the most amazing clarinet player, performer in in the world,
right.
but can't teach a beginning clarinet class to save their life
Isn't
'cause
that
they
the truth?
they just I hate to say it, they just hate kids, and they hate how stupid kids behave. Kids act anything half grown is stupid. I don't care
No.
if it's a raccoon or a kid. Anything half grown is stupid, and I was, and I still am, but you but you gotta love working with those kids doing stupid things every day.
And I'm gonna
And
get blasted for this, Mike, but some of my best teachers, some of the people that connected with me were not necessarily first chair kids in their, performance life.
that's right.
They
That's
just
exactly right.
they just love teaching, they just love the concept of band or orchestra or and giving somebody else that experience. And so
Yeah.
I could belabor that, but we used to make fun of one of my high school directors because he could not play his horn to save himself, but he was a great teacher.
Yeah.
So,
You're exactly right, and I think sometimes someone who's not as good a player, they become a better teacher because they know how to fix things. If
right.
someone's an amazing virtuoso musician, sometimes they have a hard time analyzing why this kid doesn't sound right, because to them, it not that it came easily, but they know how to do it so well.
I was getting ready to
And
say the same thing. It's not that
yeah.
they don't understand why it's hard for you to do that thing that they do so easy.
Yeah.
So,
And it's
uh,
not to say that there are great musicians out there that are also great teachers.
no,
And Gary
agreed,
Garner,
agreed,
my
agreed.
gosh, Gary Garner can play the euphonium part off a King March on his flute and transpose it in his head
Yeah,
by sight. He's an amazing musician, still teaching, what, age 95 now? He
right.
still clinics bands, it's
And
amazing.
and
And he
connecting.
fits,
Yeah,
yeah, and connecting, he fits both molds, but most of us are stronger one or the other. Most of
I
us.
agree with that.
We're not all Gary Garners,
Right.
and because he's pretty special, and every part of the world has guys like him,
Sure.
that are amazing musicians and, yeah, we don't wanna belabor that too much, but I think our listeners understand what we're saying. You gotta have a love for teaching
And kids.
and kids to
Yeah.
make it work, okay? I'm gonna jump to this one. The first mistake new teachers make, and this is going back to what you said earlier, Derek, making choosing a place to apply is making one of the following statements. "I only wanna teach in"
Insert. Yeah.
parentheses, insert high demand area here. I only want to teach in the suburbs of Dallas Fort Worth.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that, but that's kind of limiting. Or I won't consider a small school. Okay. Um, I'm not willing to move. Now, sometimes you're kind of limited by your family and your spouse might have a job somewhere doing something totally different. So maybe you are limited, but if you're just not willing to move, then here's a secret. There are great kids everywhere.
Exactly.
There are amazing kids in El Paso. There's amazing kids in Texarkana, in Wichita Falls, and I've got friends all over the nation. I'm a board of directors of the Skyriders. There's amazing kids in Hutchinson, Kansas.
Right.
They're everywhere. They're everywhere. The fear of moving is a environmental thing. It's a mental process for the
Sure.
director,
But you know
for
what's
the applicant.
crazy is I hear that statement, "I only wanna teach in the Metroplex," coming out of people that have no life experience in the Metroplex. Their entire life experience has been A, small town, B, a smaller college. Doesn't say that their education was any less, but the culture and the people that they're used to working with.
Yeah.
So, here's a real fast example for you.
Okay.
The retail store that I work for has stores, mostly in West Texas and then one in Central Texas, and then in 2017, we bought a store in the Metroplex. So now we're in the Metroplex. The cultural difference in that store compared to all the other stores we have took us a while to adapt and figure out why is this so different.
Yeah.
And so everything's fine. We moved on, but I'm just saying from an experiential standpoint, um, especially new graduate, let's get our feet in there and learn what it's like to actually teach. It's probably you can tell me if you think I'm inaccurate in that, but you're fighting more than just learning how to teach if you go completely geographically away from anything you've ever known, the pace of life, the amount of driving, the traffic.
Oh,
It,
yeah.
it doesn't take 2 minutes to get to school now. It takes an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So that was a long
Yeah, you
ramble. Sorry, but
No, no, that's not a ramble. That's exactly good information for people to think about. Um, sometimes what we want is not what we need. That's the hard part because they want what they see when they go to convention with the powerhouse band programs. Um, and that's nothing wrong with wanting that.
curious to say that's not
It's
a
great.
problem. Yeah.
But it is a situation to where, we need to find where we can teach best at and grow best at. And I want to bring up one thing. There's a situation that exists, and I'm not going to lie to you, it does happen occasionally, but either you go the small school route or you go the big school route.
And it's kind of for life. Is that what you're
It's hard to make that jump, but if you do it correctly, it's not hard to make that jump. I know plenty of guys. I know a fine arts director east of Dallas that, he graduated from Abilene Wiley, and he taught at Decatur when it was a 3A school, and he worked his way up the system. So here's how you make the jump. If I always tell these applicants this, is go, "Well, I don't wanna teach at a 1A, 2A, 3A because I think I'm gonna be pigeonholed." But if you go and have success at a 1A, 2A, 3A, then someone's gonna want you at a 4A, okay? If that's your goal to go up the ladder, go for it, okay? Then you get to a 4A, then don't be an assistant, be a head director. Because if you've already been the head director at 1A, 2A, 3A, I would highly suggest don't be an assistant at a 4A because all of a sudden you've subjugated yourself to the fact that you're not the one in control.
right?
So make sure it's a 4A, maybe a little bit of good experience at that program. Get that program up to a certain level. Then someone in 5A is going to look at you. You can make that jump. I think the whole pigeonhole thing, there's some truth to it. But if you don't want to be pigeonholed, then there are ways to get across that divide. And
Sure.
there's other guys like a good friend of mine, Brian Tillman at Erie County. He's at a 1A high school, and he's retiring this year, and he's loved it, and he has a great home work life balance, and he's a member of that community, and he's an amazing individual and a wonderful musician, jazz player. So you got to find out where you're at, and some folks I think they want to be in the metroplex, and then they get into some smaller school, and all of a sudden they go, "I'm kind of happy here.
Yeah.
This would be a great place for my kids to attend, and now my kids can do all the different activities and, they're you just gotta figure it out, but I just wanted to throw that out there that the idea of being pigeonholed, that does exist,
Right.
but if you wanna cross that divide, it can be done. It
Agreed.
can be
And I
done.
was again, this all started out of the statement of uh I only want to teach in parenthesis.
Yeah.
Make make sure if you have an opportunity to go either direction that you actually just look at it and say, don't limit yourself.
Yes.
You might miss a great opportunity,
Yes.
or you might walk into a terrible thing because you pigeonholed yourself.
Yeah. That's well put. Yeah, you
So,
pigeonholed yourself is what you did. Okay.
all right,
Um, and then things down at the bottom of this, I like for applicants to try to make it one page on the resume if possible. That's not a deal breaker by any means, but please don't send a resume that has 15 pages and you were line leader in kindergarten and you had a perfect attendance award in third grade and just try to see if you can make it fit on one page, maybe two pages at the most. But they've got so many things, especially if you're one of those ones wanting to go into the metroplex. Oh my gosh, they probably have 200 applicants for every job, and
even
so
if
if you
they
give
don't
them
have an opening.
yeah, even if they don't have an opening. So just try to make it as concise and as well thought out as possible. Another thing is send it in PDF, not Word format. I don't know how many times I've gotten resumes in Word format, and then I print them off, and it looks like some drunk person put it together.
Right.
And it's not the applicant's fault. It's just that my Word might be 15 years older than their version of Word, and it tries to print it out, but then all the everything's off. So
Right.
PDF is PDF for a reason, you know.
And it also keeps me from going, I'm going to edit this and send it back. Fixed it for you.
Yeah, that would be funny. So your resume was really pretty bad, but I fixed it for you. Here we
Here you
go.
go.
Yeah. Make it concise, triple check spelling, make sure the cover letter is the correct school. Okay.
Right.
I keep saying that. Don't send a really big, huge resume. If you had a babysitting job once, don't put that on there. And here's a really important one that I find is a problem. Especially it's a generational thing for the most part, but the ones who are looking at the applications and the ones who are hiring are more attuned to calling you than they are of sending an email or a text.
Right.
especially if they're gonna offer you the job. I'm not
I
saying they don't do it, but most of us will go, "I'm gonna give them a call because I wanna hear their response." I don't wanna send them an email, say, "Hey, we're gonna offer you this job as such and such." Check your voicemails. It may be an interview opportunity. It might be someone offering you the job, and if you don't answer your phone and don't check your I'm not saying it has to be like you're waiting for it to buzz, you
Right.
know, but if you don't answer and don't respond back quickly, that we just assume you're not interested.
Right.
Okay, so
Or
check
I
your
s
phone.
I see people all the time, Apple phone tells you how many missed calls you have. I've seen people or email counts
Yes.
that are in hundreds. And I'm
Yes.
like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. That would give me so much anxiety.
I
I'm the
guess that's
person that I like to have maybe at the most 4 emails in my inbox at any given time,
right,
and, I don't have any voicemails. I mean,
right.
it's listened to that day. I'm just and that's probably a bad thing, but that would give me so
No.
much anxiety.
If
And in
there's a
terms
red
of
circle
phones,
if there's a red circle with a number, it's
yeah,
getting
I don't
answered.
like it. I don't like it. It upsets me. I want it done. And also in terms of phones, when you put down references for, especially like educators, like college educators as one of your references, make sure to ask for permission if they'll allow you to put their cell phone
Right,
because the people who are taking the applicants in, they'll call that work number and it might sit there for 6 weeks.
right,
'Cause those ladies and men, they're not gonna sit by their phone all summer.
right.
They get out of school when graduation's gone, and they might be off doing other things, family, business stuff, whatever, and so just make sure you get their permission, but then if they allow you to, put their cell number
Makes
their cell
sense. Good
number,
good thought.
and,
Okay.
be available to interview. I chuckle because this happens sometimes. If I have to get to the 5th or 6th option for your availability, it makes me think you don't really want to work here. Yes. Well, can you come in on this Tuesday? Well, no, I've got this going on. What about next Thursday? No, I've got this. And they'll go, well, anytime the week after. Okay, how about that Wednesday? Oh, no, no, no. I forgot. I've got to be at this. And and after a while, I know it's probably real things, but in my mind, I'm clicking it off as, if they really wanted to come here, they'd cancel one of those
Right.
things.
This is
And
their
say,
side hustle. This is
yeah,
not important to them.
yeah, if they're looking for a job, they're looking for a job. I'm not saying give up the rest of your life, but if I have to get to the 6th option for when you're gonna interview, that's a dangerous sign. I've already got a bad impression of you. It makes
Right.
me think you just don't wanna to work here. And just a few final random thoughts, because 'cause we're really good at random thoughts on
Good.
Ask Mike. It's easy to get discouraged in this process, both as an applicant and as someone looking to hire someone, but you gotta trust the process. You really do. Get reaching out to your network opportunities like past teachers, past colleagues, anyone you know of connections. I'll give you an example. When I got to my job that I worked at for 19 years, the assistant soup was Don Harrison, his roommate in college, and he went to high school in Iowa Park with Coach Will Clapp. Coach Will Clapp's son was in my band at Holiday, and Will Clapp and his family lived behind me across the alley. So I would give Will a ride to school because his dad had to be there earlier. So Will would walk over to my house and I'd give Will a ride to school. Now, don't you think that gave me a leg up when Don Harrison said, "Oh, you lived in Iowa Park?" He goes, "I was a high school football player that won a state championship at Iowa Park." I go, "Yes, sir, Mr. Harrison. I know all about that team." Said, "I grew
Yes.
up in Iowa Park." And, "Hey, do you know Coach Clapp?" He goes, "Well, yeah, we were roommates in college. And oh, yeah, I took his son to school every day in high school. And they live right behind me in Iowa Park." And I'm not saying that that got me the job, but it sure didn't hurt.
Right.
Use
I t
whatever connections you've got that are viable connections to make that personal, kind of thing.
I tell people all the time, whether it's, trying to win a sales account or get an interview, we can say we're impersonal all day long, but we all find ourselves liking one option better than another in just about everything.
Yes.
And
And we
I
might
wanna
not even have a logic for it.
right. I wanna be the option you like better anytime I can make that happen.
Yeah.
So, all it take again, be smart, be kind,
Mhm.
do the little things, and
And I'll throw in one more thing about researching. The school I was at here in Abilene, we're a lot of our kids were Dice Air Force kids, and so I researched that,
Right.
and I figured it out, how what percentage of Wiley High School kids were Dice Air Force kids, because I grew up an Air Force kid.
You're
So I
say
made sure to mention that. So I've lived in Germany, I've lived in Altus, Oklahoma, lived in Riverside, California, lived in Colorado and Denver, said all on Air Force bases. And boy, don't you know that went a long ways because they were like, "Hey, we need more people
Right.
because that's a big part of our population, and that military culture is something totally different
Right.
than any other culture out there." And I was steeped in it.
Dare you say,
So
and it was you.
yeah, yeah, so, I think those things made it easier to hire me, and my bands had done well in the past, but I think those things helped equally as well.
Cool.
But go ahead, I interrupted your
No, no,
tie-up.
you're
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Um, the last thing I will throw out because you said it multiple times is don't panic.
yeah,
Nobody it is so obvious when you're interviewing desperate.
mhm,
God, I'll do whatever you say because I got to have a job, and you don't really mean that. You're
right,
just worried about getting a job,
yeah, just need a check.
right? I would rather be genuine and do it for the employer and the employee. Have everybody be honest and see each other for who and what they are. I realize that's not really the name of the game in an interview. You want to give your best foot, but panic stinks. I mean, you can
Yes,
smell it.
you can smell it from the lobby.
So, uh, just relax, trust the process, network. It's going to work out. And I hope everybody has a, I don't, this is such an awkward thing to say, Mike, but I hope everybody enjoys this wave.
Yeah,
This, I think sometimes we look at it, job searches as polar things. You're leaving because you're awesome, or you're leaving because they asked you to.
mhm,
We forget there might be multiple things in the middle.
right,
My wife got a job in a new district and it pays well, and I'm gonna move with her.
yes, or your parents are sick. Your
Right,
your mom's in a nursing home, so you've gotta move closer to Galveston,
right.
you know? So
And
there's lots of things going on.
nobody is going to assume the worst or the best. Life is typically found in the middle. It's never as
Yeah.
bad as you think it is, never as good as you think it is. And now I'm just reading quotes out of a book. Sorry. Let's I I'm glad I don't really ever see myself doing that again. If there was some wood around,
Yeah,
I'd knock on it. But
that's right.
for those of you uh that find yourself there, it's part of what we do. It is part of the human experience.
Mhm.
Relax, trust the process. We're pulling for you. We hope you have an absolutely wonderful experience, whether you're hiring or whether you are looking to be hired. So,
Awesome.
brother, hope you have a great season this week. Hope you get to go out and do things that you enjoy, hug those grandkids,
Will do.
and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Good to talk with you.